Ken Livingstone is expected to find out tonight whether or not he's being expelled from the Labour Party. The former London mayor has been suspended for the last year following his comments about Adolf Hitler. A disciplinary hearing is coming to an end any minute now. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is standing by outside that hearing in Westminster. Simon, what news?
Nina, Ken Livingstone arrived for the third day of his Labour Party disciplinary hearing, still insisting that his remarks about Hitler supporting Zionism were historically accurate, still refusing to say sorry and still arguing he hadn't brought his party into disrepute.
People who brought the party into disrepute are those who actually lied. Labour MPs who said I said Hitler was a Zionist. Articles in the Jewish Chronicle saying not just I said Hitler was a Zionist, but that I'd said Jews were like Nazis, that I'd said it wasn't anti-Semitic to hate the Jews of Israel. Now even the Labour Party bureaucracy, which is not my greatest fan, has pored over all of that and found not a shred of evidence to support any of those claims.
That brought an immediate response from the newspaper referred to there, the Jewish Chronicle.
There's not a word, not a dot, not a comma that the Jewish Chronicle has ever published about Ken Livingstone that's not being entirely accurate. Those comments were made nearly a year ago. The first time that either Ken Livingstone or anyone connected with Ken Livingstone has even mentioned any claims about inaccuracy has been today, on the day that he is possibly about to be expelled from the Labour Party.
We're still waiting for Ken Livingstone to emerge to tell us what's happened in the tribunal. Has he been expelled from the Labour Party for the second time in his political career, or is he still a member? We'll let you know as soon as we have some news.
Simon, thank you. Yeah, we'll try and get back to you if we get that result while we are on air. The American woman whose husband was killed in the Westminster terror attack came out of hospital for a few hours today for what was described as a service of hope 2 weeks after the murders. So very close to where her husband was killed, Melissa Cochran joined 2,000 people at Westminster Abbey this lunchtime. Injured herself that day on the bridge, she came to the service in a wheelchair and said it was a fitting honour to her husband. Our correspondent Simon Harris was watching.
Melissa Cochran's faith and courage have been tested, but 2 weeks to the day after she was widowed and badly wounded on a sightseeing trip to celebrate her wedding anniversary, she was determined to take her place in Westminster Abbey. 1,800 people were invited to what was described as a service of hope. They included colleagues of PC Keith Palmer, who was stabbed to death, other police officers who responded to the murderous attack, along with ambulance and fire crews who helped save lives. They were joined by 3 senior members of the royal family. Prince William remembered an earlier Good Samaritan.
He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him.
The husband and daughters of another of the victims, Aisha Frade, would hear the Dean of Westminster put into words the question which no one has yet answered.
What could possibly motivate a man to hire a car and take it from Birmingham to Brighton to London and then drive it fast at people he'd never met? Couldn't possibly know. Against whom he had no personal grudge, no reason to hate them, and then run at the gates of the Palace of Westminster to cause another death.
The Dean, like many of those in the congregation, had a personal connection with the events of a fortnight ago.
I felt very bewildered and shocked by it, I think, when it first happened. And then very quickly we were invited to take in some of the parliamentarians and some of the people who witnessed it.
Keith Palmer, the officer who was outside Parliament, was a friend and colleague of mine. So it was a really good opportunity for us to all come together today. There's the police service and there's Londoners, and remember those people.
Melissa Cochran said she appreciated the service too.
Beautiful, very nice.
Many of those here today will gather again next week for another service in another church when PC Palmer's funeral is held in Southwark. Simon Harris, ITV News, Westminster Abbey.
The wife of a London businessman who's been in jail in America for 30 years has told ITV News London she cried for joy when she heard he is to be given a fresh hearing. Krishna Maharajah was convicted of a double murder in 1987. His wife, Marita, said she feared he would die in jail after losing an appeal last summer, but she now hopes he may soon be released. And as Simon Harris reports, he has always maintained his innocence.
I've said from day one I was framed for these crimes.
I was framed for these crimes.
I was framed for these murders.
Framed for these crimes.
For 3 decades, Krishna Maharaj's mantra has been unchanged. Now the former death row inmate has been granted a fresh chance to try to prove his innocence. An American court has agreed to a new appeal.
I just started crying like a little baby because I was so happy, I couldn't believe that finally somebody really listened to us,
When ITV News first covered the case of Krishna Maharaj in the 1990s, he was facing execution in the electric chair. The one-time millionaire businessman and racehorse owner from Peckham in South London was convicted of a double murder. In 1986, a father and son, Derek and Dwayne Moo Young, were found shot dead in a Miami hotel room. Maharaj's lawyers eventually convinced the courts the case against him was flawed. The death penalty was quashed. Instead, he was sentenced to life. Now, new evidence has emerged linking the Moo Young murders to Pablo Escobar, who ran a ruthless drugs cartel in Colombia.
There's one fantastic woman who has done a bunch of investigation under very dangerous circumstances to get cartel sicarios or assassins to agree to come forward and say they were involved in the murder. Now, that's quite a miracle.
But Maharaj is 79, in poor health, suffering from diabetes.
We are old. We wonder, are we going to be able to make it home before we really die?
Maharaj has had his hopes raised and dashed before, but once again, returning to London might not be an impossible dream. Simon Harris, ITV News.